Hello everyone, my name is Josh and this is Whimsical and Interesting Musings, and today we're going to be focusing on something a little bit different, and mostly we're going to be talking about a video game that I really like, and it is called Bioshock. It was published in 2007 by 2K Games, and it was created by Ken Levine and his team. And the whole entire base of this game is it's set in the 1960s, and we follow the main character by the name of Jack, who, after receiving a birthday present on a plane, his plane mysteriously just crashes in the middle of the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and he has nowhere really to turn. He's kind of on the verge of drowning when he comes across a strange spire of a building out in the middle of the ocean. So he takes refuge in this said place, and he ends up discovering a mural where it's basically a mural to a man with a long thin moustache and a banner which basically says "No gods here, only man." And right off the cuff, this particular setup is really interesting because not only is this place very dark and mysterious and it's out in the middle of the ocean, but it also has a banner kind of commemorating someone who we haven't met yet. And who is this person with the long thin moustache and with the banner with such a very broad philosophy? So Jack basically goes down into this submarine and he ends up going into a underwater city by the name of Rapture. And Rapture is a place that was created by Andrew Ryan to pretty much, go by his own rules and play by his own means. Man is entitled to the sweat of his brow, according to Andrew Ryan, because all the other religions saying, it belongs to God, it belongs to the people, no, it belongs to everyone. And he very famously says, I chose a different approach. I chose Rapture. And that entire opening where you see the grandiosity of this underwater city, it's absolutely breathtaking. Even after all these years, it still manages to leave me jaw-dropped when I see the city itself in its majesty. And it really just kind of has this very kind of brilliant atmosphere and this brilliant sense of no matter where you are in this particular place, you're alone. And Jack knows that he's alone the minute he steps into that submarine and he sees those things in the upper deck of that building before he goes into said submarine. So it's very interesting to actually kind of get that starting point. But the story kind of takes on a very interesting turn when he gets into one of the buildings of Rapture. He discovers one of the survivors trying to basically run away from a very strange humanoid creature who has hooks for hands. And this is very, frightening because it's shot in a very dimly lit space. And you're kind of, just watching this man who we know is going to die because he doesn't have any weapons on him, nor does he have any means of defending himself, nor does he have anywhere to turn. So immediately he dies in a very graphic way where he gets gutted by this man with two hooks, and we are immediately thrown to the deep end. Who the hell was that guy, and what was he doing with that man, and what did he want with that man, or what made him, take that sort of a turn? And it's a very brilliant opener, but also it establishes a lot of interesting things about the world. We get a monologue by Andrew Ryan basically explaining the actual structure of Rapture, why he built it, even though in the 1960s this sort of thing would be impossible to do, because in the 1960s people didn't have the technology we have now. So the fact that they were able to build an underwater city really is kind of a bizarre concept, but you kind of shrug it off because it is supposed to be a fantasy type world or alternate history. Not necessarily alternate history, but more cyberpunk type version of the 1960s, so you kind of can lay it off and say, well, oh, okay, we can believe this for now. And we are very quickly introduced, only via voice, the character of Atlas, an Irishman who basically contacts you through this, little radio that you keep on you the whole entire time. And the whole entire game is done in the first person perspective, which means you're basically the camera and you have a main character who you only see their arms and their, hands and their fingers and all these other things. But this particular setup is very interesting because it gives you a very intimate connection to the character of Jack, and you are just as confused as Jack is. And Jack is supposed to be literally the audience surrogate. He doesn't know what's going on in Rapture, he doesn't know why he's there. The place is just falling apart, and he has no idea why it's happening, only that he's in this situation and he needs to get himself out of it. And that in itself is a brilliant hook. But not only that, but as the story goes on, we realise that there's more to Jack's involvement in this story than meets the eye. And I absolutely love that aspect of the game, that you think you're just some random guy who just finds himself in this place, but then it turns out that he has connectivity to the city and to the person who's running it. And it's just such a brilliant story. And the game is actually very atmospheric. I wouldn't necessarily say it's scary, because it is scary, the concepts behind it, like the idea of basically taking people and basically injecting them with the super drug that infects their brain to the point where they literally are kind of this very horrific hybrid of who they used to be. Like it kind of depicts some of your worst attributes and kind of, heightens them to a very insane degree. But it's also very frightening in the sense that there's all sorts of different enemies throughout the game, one of which is the splicers, the idea of basically taking this thing called Adam and or essentially taking these things called plasmids and kind of rewriting your genetic code. It's not Adam. Adam is the thing that pays for the plasmids. Sorry about that if I got that wrong. But yeah, the plasmids basically are your superpower. You inject it into your system, your bloodstream, and it rewrites your genetic code to the point where you literally are wielding lightning, or you're wielding electricity, or you're wielding fire, or you're kind of wielding bees at one point. There's a moment where you do actually have to wield bees to get to get to a certain location and to distract a group of splicers. But not only do we have the splicers, which are terrifying enough, if they just were in the game in themselves, it would still be pretty damn terrifying. You'd have a brilliant recipe for a great, thriller type horror video game. But the fact that they add in the big daddies, which are these massive, almost diver-esque looking monstrous creatures, which are huge, and they have these sort of rounded circular helmets, and they have drills and they have guns and all these other things on one arm, and then they just have a regular gloved hand in the other. But they also have a job to do, these big daddies, and they're very hard to destroy. But you can destroy them if you have the right guns or the right, weapons at your disposal. You can beat them with a little patience and a lot of commitment. Yeah, this game really is a tough ride, but it's a ride nonetheless, and it really is a great game. But not only do the big daddies feel like an intimidating factor in their own right, but they have a child companion by the name of Little Sisters. And Little Sisters are basically little girls, or children full stop, who have been genetically altered by the use of Adam. And there's a point where if you kill a big daddy, or a big daddy dies, and a little sister is just left to fend for themselves, and you happen to encounter one, you get the option to either harvest or save the little sister. And if you harvest the little sister, you're taking a lot of Adam, so you can go and pay for all sorts of different plasmids, and you can even bargain for different slots depending on how you spend your money and how you use those plasmids wisely, and how quickly you level up. But if you harvest them, you're killing a child, basically, and that kind of was a major turn off for me. So I felt like, okay, I'm going to, save this little girl because she's had her identity taken away from her. She's, had this horrible thing happen to her, and the least I can do is save these children from this horrible genetic gene splicing. So I really just felt like I had to save them, even when it kind of goes to the detriment and says, oh, well, you won't have enough Adam to, pay for plasmids. I don't care. I just think, I have to save this child. It's horrible what this child's become, and it just really kind of makes you think, oh, you've got to save this this is this poor child who's been hurt. So I immediately, every single time, even if I feel that, oh, I should harvest a few little sisters, I found myself going, no, I'm not going to kill a child. So that was something that really kind of made the decision quite easy for me. That, yeah, I'm saving all the little sisters. That's what I always do every time, because it just makes me feel uncomfortable when I watch, even when I watch walkthroughs or let's plays of Bioshock and someone harvests a little sister, I immediately feel uncomfortable afterwards. Like, oh, you just murdered a child. I hope you're happy. Even, yeah, it's one of those things where it kind of deliberately does it. It deliberately is designed to make you feel bad when you've done it. Like you really do kind of get that feeling of that bad, like a really bad feeling in your in your heart or in your stomach, and I think that really is an incredible choice. But what I really love about this game is it really does ratchet up the storytelling, and it manages to, in a world where you're basically just going through a wasteland and you have not many people to talk to, not many people to physically talk to, like have one-on-one conversations with, because the majority of them are genetically altered splicers, and if they do talk to you, they're mostly throwing insults at you or trying to basically blow your head off or kill you with a machine gun or a knife or something like that. And they're not really going to have a one-to-one conversation with you. So the designers actually got around this by inventing these little audio logs, which are these things that you pick up throughout the game to get different perspectives on the legacy of Rapture, the development of plasmids, and the evolution of Adam, and various other things that progress the plot. And you even get a couple of audio logs from Andrew Ryan himself. You get you get an audio log from a man called Steinman, who is a mad scientist. Well, he was a scientist, but then he discovered Adam and plasmids, and it kind of altered his brain to the point where he actually developed quite a drug addiction to plasmids, to the point where he actually became a very deformed and very horrific, insanely mad individual. Honestly, him and Dr. Chenard from Hellbound Hellraiser 2, they could start a book club, but they'd have so many things to discuss because they're both practically a part of the same psychology, in the sense that they're very egotistical. They very much are mostly interested in medicine and surgery so that they can dissect people, and there's no real redeeming qualities to them. Steinman even says, this is before he gets infected with plasmids, by the way, and Adam. He says, I want to be considered the surgical equivalent of Picasso. The world called him a genius. And I wanted to do with a scalpel what that Spaniard could do with a brush. And I hope I haven't got that quote completely wrong. I've been paraphrasing it a bit, but that in itself kind of shows the psychology that Stein was already, off the deep end. He was already full on Walter White by the time he got the chance to become a doctor or become, an expert on plasmids and all these other things. So it basically gives you an insight into how plasmids work and how it alters your genetic, not just your genetic code, your actual biological structure, but also it infects your mind and infects your perception of the world and how you see things. Hence why the splices are the way they are. And there's so many memorable moments in this particular game. There's one instance at the very end of the game where you confront Andrew Ryan, and he says, what's the difference between a man and a slave? It's not class or etiquette or grace. It's simply put, a man chooses, a slave obeys. And he says it repeatedly, and he basically wants you to kill him, essentially. And it's a great moment, but the monologue, and the guy who voices Andrew Ryan, he just does an absolutely wonderful job of just portraying this grandiosity to this character, and really kind of showing that he is basically just this guy who is a Bond villain, basically. He is this guy who is really, really egotistical. He doesn't care about anybody else but himself, and even then he has this philosophy where you do stuff to satisfy your own whims, and it's called objectivism, which is you basically have to do stuff for yourself in order to get full satisfaction to a community. And that in itself is kind of flawed, because the whole entire point of human nature is we're meant to help each other. And if you're focusing on one aspect of yourself, which is self-preservation, or doing stuff for the sake of one's own benefit, it can become very detrimental, because then what have you got to show for it in the end, other than you're excessively wealthy? But they always say money can't buy you happiness, so it goes to show that even if you're mega wealthy, you still can have this element of being unhappy. Hence why Steinman went to the plasmids, because he clearly, wanted that extra kick. He clearly felt like this was giving him an insight into the world. And there was even a point when you're actually fighting him as a boss, Steinman, he says things like, "What's this, mistress? An intruder?" Like he's actually talking. He actually believes that someone is talking to him and actually kind of making him do these horrific things to these women and to these residents of Rapture. And he is definitely crazy. He's probably one of my favourite bosses overall, because he definitely is his own brand of crazy. And it wasn't even a simple fact of, the plasmids made him do it. He actually had that little part of his brain fully in effect before he became a splicer. So that really is quite interesting. It's kind of like Dr. Chenard in Hellbound Hellraiser 2, because he had a lot of he had a very twisted and very warped view of medicine and the mind. Essentially, he has a great monologue in that film where he basically says, the mind is a labyrinth, and we need to pass through its over various corners and various pathways, so that we have to know, and we have to go to the center of that labyrinth to find the truth of a person's inner world. And it's such a great speech that he gives, but it really gives us an insight into how egotistical he is, and how very kind of warped and very dangerous he can be. I'd definitely love to do a review of both Hellraiser 1 and Hellraiser 2 one day. So if you want to see that, let me know, because I've got a lot to say about the upcoming remake as well, and I'd love to have a little bit of context for that. So look forward to that very soon. And this particular game is really good. I love all the plasmid weapons. I love the fire one, the infernal one, the incinerator one. That's a great one. I even made a joke during my Series 7 of Inside Number 9 Wise Owl review, that I basically wanted to start off by saying, "Light up foes to 1,000 degrees, warning fire spreads." And that was basically a reference to those infomercials that you get whenever you get a new plasmid. And I thought that was just such a great quirky little way. And when you're actually fighting the splicers, it utilizes music of the 50s and the 60s very well. Like when you kill someone, or you blow someone up, or you've just gone through a very kind of hard wave of all these different splicers coming at you and trying to kill you, you'd immediately, like, say for example, you kill one of them by hitting them on the head with a wrench after you've stunned them with your electricity. So all of a sudden a song would come on, like, "How much is that doggy in the window?" And it would immediately, have this very, grated, scratchy sound effect to it, like it's almost like being played on a record player set. And it really does add to the atmosphere and adds to the creep factor. And I absolutely love the use of certain songs, like the song "Somewhere Beyond the Sea" came up at one point, and I thought that was brilliant. Like I love the fact that it's basically a very happy-go-lucky song about going out to sea and exploring new worlds, but it just kind of adds this extra layer of darkness to kind of add to the fact that you're literally out on your own. You're out on your Todd without a paddle, essentially, in this very alien world where anything can get you, and you can't have conversations with people. You can't actually go and meet regular people, except for the very end, of course, when you actually do meet face to face Andrew Ryan. You do actually have a conversation, and I friggin' love this game. This game is just so good, and I love the atmosphere. I love the music. I love that opening introduction to Rapture. It still leaves my jaw on the floor every single time I watch it. It's such an incredible moment. It's so iconic as well. And excuse me. The game was very critically successful, and rightly so, because it's an amazing game. And I really do like this game. I give it a 5 out of 5 stars, and I will be doing the other games in the series as well. but I just have to go and do some other things. I'm going to be doing a new segment later on called Sitcom Comforts, and I will be doing a sitcom that not many people know about. So look forward to that, and I hope you're all having a very good day, and bye.